Humans are political creatures. Our opinions advance in many forms, from personal missions to public demonstrations, or to more clandestine forms of expression. Symbols abound in political imagery because they can be instantly recognized and often elicit an immediate and sometimes emotional response. Housed within the Prints and Photographs Division of the Library of Congress is the largest collection of post-World War II political and propaganda posters in the world. 14,000 posters from 1967 to the present have been donated to the library by author and collector Gary Yanker.
I would exclude no one, no matter how controversial or even bland they were politically, just to get an accurate representation of propaganda, campaign, left, right, middle. And in fact, it's better to show the gamut than any particular group or part of the spectrum's posters, because then it takes the spotlight off the author of the collection.
Yanker's interest in posters started when he was a student in Leningrad during the late 1960s. As his collection grew, he identified a symbolic language spanning the cultures of over 100 nations.
I began to see common symbols like the raised fist, the use of the hand stretched out or clenched, raised up. Those symbols appeared in thousands of posters. It became clear there was a language of poster symbolism. If a motif is repeated over and over again, it becomes a symbol. People probably derive these symbols from their behavior when they're doing a political demonstration or when they're angry or emotional about something. And then eventually it works its way into the graphic language.
Yanker's studies resulted in the publishing of his book, Prop Art, in 1972.
And you begin to classify the symbols as being centrist, left-wing, or right-wing symbols. So, for example, it's hard to imagine a raised fist being in a poster by a right-wing party. Likewise, the Christian cross. It's hard to imagine being used by a party that's not close to the center or toward the right. If you go from there, you'll find at the extreme right the use of the cross by the Ku Klux Klan.
Sometimes one group will borrow from the symbols of the other side to try to validate their appeal.
The poster with the dove being stabbed by the sickle is a good example of the juxtaposition of two very provocative symbols. One part of the left wing is impaling the other part, but it's a symbol being used by a right-wing group, the Young Americans for Freedom, and they were showing how peace was really being killed by the communists, and that's why we have to defeat them.
Posters were often produced by small political groups too poor to buy print ads or commercial spots on television. Posters became an affordable and easily distributed grassroots medium. One hope was that cameras might capture the posters and spread their image and symbolism.
We have to be aware of how this political graphic language can be used. You know, it can be used to attack an opponent. It can be used to evoke pity, as we did in the Avenge Kent State poster. Political argument is designed to convince you with truth or falsehood to change your belief.
Of the many American symbols, Uncle Sam is still used today after over a century of service.
Originally, the Uncle Sam character was used in a way on behalf of the government to recruit troops, raise money for war. Now here's a symbol everybody knows in America. And so when the peace movement wants to appeal, say, now Uncle Sam wants you back. He doesn't want you to go to war. So it makes you think, oh, there's a legitimacy, there's a broad base, a consensus about getting out of this war.
Even Hollywood cartoon characters have played symbolic Uncle Sam doing their part to inspire patriotism.
A real live nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July.
Before the Jubilee, hurrah, hurrah! We give the heroes 3 times 3, hurrah, hurrah! The Lord of
During the 19...
That unlike a lot of other archives, we can collect very broadly and very deeply in almost any area you would name.
Since the advent of the motion picture camera, political groups have seized the symbolic potential of film as a propaganda tool. The Nazis were particularly adept at creating persuasive imagery to sell their ideological platform.
The Nazis seemed to be obsessed with rituals, large rituals which used heavy block-like masses. People themselves become a symbol. It's like movement in itself is almost an aim in these films.
In the United States, we also used film to shape public opinion and unify our country's war efforts.
We also have a very interesting film called Bolshevism on Trial. It was done in 1919. It was extremely anti-Bolshevist.
Depending on the context of the time and particular conflict,
there was so much prejudice and misunderstanding of the Soviet Union, in which I partly shared.
And so what I think Hollywood does is they try to not deal with the issues very much, but make a series of extremely naive movies saying that there's really nothing very different about the Russians after all.
There is a bear in the woods.
The political campaign is another arena rife with persuasive symbolism. One of Russia's national symbols, the bear, was used effectively as an antagonist in President Reagan's presidential bid.
Since no one can really be sure who's right, isn't it smart to be as strong as the bear?
Over the past 5 decades, the use of political commercials and campaigns has become a very important part of our democratic process. And the major way that candidates communicate to voters is through the use of symbols, trying to associate themselves with major aspects of American culture. In some of the earliest commercials, such as those that were done for Dwight Eisenhower in 1952, we see some really traditional symbols, things like Uncle Sam, things like the donkey and the elephant for the two political parties. A lot of our modern campaign commercials actually have become very issue-oriented. So we see symbols that are meant to associate the candidate with some kind of issue or with some kind of an emotional appeal.
Not long ago, people were saying it would probably be closed forever.
One good example of that, research has tended to show that negative spots work often because people remember negative information better than they remember positive information. So that even though voters may say they don't like negative ads and they hate them and they wish candidates wouldn't use them, they remember the symbols in negative ads much more than they do positive ads.
Generating fear is now a common way to get the voters' attention.
Does a president know that planes bomb children?
One problem that we've seen with the use of images in political campaigns in the last few decades has been the tendency of candidates to try to manipulate the presentation of their image or their opponent's image through technology and computer manipulations. This spot is a good example of the use of a traditional legend, the Pinocchio story, in which the candidate's nose is made to grow in order to represent the possibility that he's lying.
Distortions about his business career and lies about Sununu's positions on the issues.
As we have seen, symbols in politics are an often used tool with undeniable power, but nowhere is the power of symbols more effectively used to manipulate us than in the world of advertising and big business.